This is Wake Up and Lead, a daily podcast where ambitious young professionals learn to lead themselves. I'm your host, Hampton Dorch, and I'm here with another returning guest. This guy's name is Mason Cosby. We went to high school together and didn't see him for several years. And then I saw him on LinkedIn, and he's probably a massive reason for why I started posting on LinkedIn and why I have a podcast. So I owe a lot to this guy. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me back. After the first one and the surprise introduction of the rebel yell in the middle of the episode, I wasn't sure if you were going to bring me back or if the listeners would want to hear me back. So I'm glad that we didn't scare some people away last time.
Yes. For those listening, we went to high school called Vestavia. Rebels was the mascot, and Mason was the guy that would do the rebel yell. And it was truly unbelievable the way at which you were able to yell. I mean, didn't you cause some potential damage to your vocal cords or something?
I did have a doctor tell me that if I continued, that I would probably not be able to ever really actually sing, which granted I couldn't beforehand anyway, so that didn't deter me. But then they were like, you may cause permanent damage and lose significant range in your voice and just become super monotone, which not super great. So yeah, I stopped after high school. I don't yell as much as I used to, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, sure. No, I believe you. Well, one of the cool things I like about being at this period in our lifetime is I feel like, not for everyone, but for a lot of folks that are ambitious young professionals, a lot can change. And it was probably a little over a year ago that I had Mason on here. At the time, neither of us, I think, even knew that we were having a child. You maybe just had figured that out. So since then, we have both become dads. And now Mason has started his own business that is growing faster than he can maybe even handle. So yes. I know you can handle it, but a lot has happened in this guy's life. And so how about I ask you this? I'll put it this way. We've got faith, family, fitness, fellowship, and future. That's what I'm talking about here. What were the three that you said you wanted to hit on today? Just tell everybody what you think we should focus on.
I think faith, family, future would kind of be the three to hone in on. Especially if you go back and listen to the last episode, I think we dug into the extended period of time where I thought I was going to be a pastor and how I still try to live out my faith. I still try to be ministerial, but it just looks radically different than I thought it would. So again, especially balancing now family and trying to grow a business, I'm still trying to the best of my ability, prioritize faith and live that out. So those would be the three I'd love to dig into.
Yeah. I love it, man. Well, I think from a faith standpoint, I knew that you wanted to be a pastor, and then you you went to marketing. I think you said, if you were to write a book back then, it might have been from ministry to marketing. And I think you've posted a few times. We've talked about this, and right now in this massive transition of learning how to be a dad and run a business, there's probably some question marks into how does that play itself out, just from a faith standpoint in work. But want to share a few thoughts on what you learned about, hey, I actually don't have to be a pastor to be in ministry. In fact, I might even be able to have as much or more impact doing some of the work that I am.
Yeah. So there's a couple pieces to it. One, within my family, we have established some pretty repeatable pillars for our faith. So my wife grew up as a missionary in Turkey and loves international missions. And in her high school, there were 80 different nations present. So she loves just understanding and has a deep empathy for internationals that are now in the States. So one of the things that we do is every single Tuesday night, my wife and I go and teach English to refugees at our church. And that is a way that we have established this pillar. People have asked me, how do you have time for that? And it's simply because we make the time. So we know every Tuesday night, and actually the way that we've set it up for our family is my in-laws live about 30 minutes away. So my wife's mom comes over at 5, takes care of our daughter all night. We go on a nice little date before we go teach English, to just have some time for ourselves. We go teach English. We come home, put our daughter to bed. So we've had that pillar where we can live out our faith. And I'll be very honest, with this recent transition, I've not been as consistent with a daily devotional. It's probably in every other daily devotional right now. It's something that I'm working on being more consistent in, but trying to actually have the daily time where I sit down and I slow down. I was talking with a buddy last night of just your brain is never truly at rest when you wake up mid thought.
Mm,
And I've
yeah.
every single day for the past 6 months since our daughter's been born, since I've launched this business, I wake up mid thought either on how I can better take care of my wife, how I can take care of my daughter, or how I can better grow the business. So I personally
Mm,
know that I need that daily time with the Lord that is hopefully, and I try to quiet my mind, but it's just quieter. And I want to
mm,
be very clear. I am far from perfect at it. If anything, I am very flawed at it, but I know it's something that I'm working towards and trying to be better in. And then the
yeah.
last piece is, some depending on who you are, there's some that would say this is probably ritualistic and it's not necessary, but my family just still tries to show up to church every Sunday. There are often Sundays where our daughter, I wouldn't say often, there's actually been two in the past 6 months. I can specifically say, like, she had a complete meltdown and we got nothing out of the sermon. And there's a lot of days where we like have to listen while also taking care of her and make sure that she stays quiet during the sermon. But like, there is still something about the simple nature of showing up and being a part of the body
Mm,
of believers and being surrounded by your community that very tangibly can see that you're there, can see how you're doing. Like, there are weeks where friends will come and be like, "You guys are looking good. Like, you seem well rested. Like, how are things going?" I have other weeks where people are like, "You guys look rough. Like, what is going on? Can we be helpful?" So just those are three things that I would say, as I think through faith, especially in a very busy season of launching a business, of having a
mhm.
child, you need to establish your pillars. Otherwise, it is always going to fall to the wayside. And then the other side
Yeah.
is, if you are married, trying to find one of those pillars being something that you and your spouse do together to serve together, because it helps our marriage. It helps us be a united front, and it gives us a connecting point that isn't just being completely obsessed with taking care of our daughter. Like, it's something that is
Yeah.
not making us a child-centered home, but as a God-centered home. So those would be kind of my thoughts on that front.
Phew, that's good, man. One of the things I'm learning right now as a new dad is, early in your career, a lot of folks are more like individual contributors. I know you've been in marketing, done a little bit of sales, and obviously there was a time where you didn't have a daughter. Last time we talked on this podcast, I'll take a guess, and this is because I'm experiencing this right now. Over the last few years, it's been not easy, but much easier to kind of clench your fists and just work a little bit harder, because in some sense you feel like you're in control. It's like, man, I'll just do a couple more reach outs, figure out a way to close more deals. Like, I'll make that work. But now for you, it's like you've got a daughter that you don't have a lot of control over. Like, it's hard to control if she has a meltdown or not. And now you're running a business and you've got some contractors working for you. You're growing. So I would imagine you have less time, less control. The enemy probably wants you to spend less time with God, but you've never needed him more. So I guess
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, is that something that you're trying to lean into to say, man, before, obviously I knew I needed God, but it was kind of easier to figure it out on my own. But now it's like, I really need him.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that I feel, and like I had mentioned, it's something that I'm trying to be more consistent in. Like, I don't think that I have ever had, for lack of a word, more desperate prayers. Like, a
Mm,
prime example is, it was the first time it's the first time my wife went out without my daughter, and we're strictly breastfeeding, so there's no formula. It's like, I had a bottle. It was really my first time giving her a bottle. Mom was not home, just her and I, and like, I could not get her to take a bottle for like 45 minutes, and just having a meltdown about it. And finally, I just like kind of came to the end of myself, and I'm not very proud of how I handled it. Like, I got very upset. I got very frustrated, and it's not her fault. She's literally an infant. Like, I can't reason with her and say, like, you're crying because you're hungry. Eat the food, or drink the bottle. And I literally just like prayed, Lord, just have her take the bottle. And like, in that instant, she took the bottle, and it's just like, okay. I often think of, and again, specifically because, to your point, it's been, I would say, relatively easier to just kind of grind it out. And like, oh, I've got like the work stuff handled. I'm not super concerned about
hmm
that, Lord, but like the big stuff, like, I'll come to you. And just the sweetness of the Lord to actually be present in such a small moment of like my daughter taking a bottle, and he
hmm
deeply cares about those little details. So yeah,
mm,
I'll be honest, I've tried to go to the Lord more, and I will be also honest. It feels really weird to go to the Lord and say, Lord, I really need this deal to close. but especially as I'm self-employed and my wife is not working, like I am the sole provider for our family, it doesn't feel less, it feels more like, Lord, can this deal close? Especially when we had first launched, of like, I had enough clients to cover our bills, and that was where we sat. So I was like, Lord, I need this deal to close so I can actually have some margin in my life. That way, if a client left, we're not like really stuck in a hard spot. So I feel like in some ways I've been more prayerful. In other ways, probably less, because I also do have that natural bent towards I can figure this out myself. I can grind it
Mhm.
out, but simply put, I can't. So
Mm.
yeah, it's been a lot of a learning trajectory and trying to be
Yeah.
better about it, but often still stumbling, but trying to stumble forward.
Mm. I think about the picture of you feeding your daughter and like you're like, this is your food, this is what you want. I'm giving it to you. Just take it. It can be frustrating. It makes me think about like there's this picture, of you as the father, think about God. How often
Yeah.
has he put that bottle in front of us and we're like, God, what the heck? And it's like, dude, it's right there. It's kind of the picture I thought about when you shared that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've also experienced it, but becoming a father brings a whole new level of meaning to scripture when we read about our heavenly Father and recognizing that I am supposed to be a picture of what God is to my child, in the same way that I'm now more deeply understanding what it is to be like God to us, and just some of the
Mm.
frustration that might involve when like we know such a clear path for how to help our kids get exactly what they want, but like there's just times where we can't reason. So I don't know,
Yeah.
it's been a very growing experience, and I feel like it's deepened my faith in a different way than I had anticipated.
Mm. Wow. All right. So you've done something that I would say a lot of the world would think is not possible. Um, you got married right out of college, and you now have a baby, and you started your own business, and are doing very very well. I mean, I was hearing about this before, and I know that it's probably not easy, but I just think it's pretty interesting because I feel like a lot of the world says, oh, wait till way later to get married, kind of figure out your career, do your thing, have fun in your 20s, and like I know you'd be the first to say you're humble. You don't have it all together, but I just think it's pretty cool how things have worked out for you. And I'll go to the F I'll choose to kind of steer towards right here is the future part, and you can tie in like
Yeah.
family and marriage and everything to it. But one thing I do know about you is like as soon as you did go from ministry to marketing, you went all in. Like one of the things that you shared on our first episode was, yeah, I may have just worked a year, but because of the season of my life, my wife is okay with it. I'm working closer to 80 hours a week. So that's really like working 2 years. And I witnessed you absolutely grind your face off to get to this point. It's not like you just kind of, I'm going to start my own business. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you were thinking about your future at that point to kind of get to where you are now?
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I'd actually intended on Scrappy ABM probably launching full time in January, and just due to some circumstances, I actually went to my employer, and I'll be very very frank of like I was I think I was a wrong fit for that employer, and I actually went to them and said I just don't think this is working out. I'm not putting in a notice, but like I want to make sure that if we need to part ways, that we can part ways amicably, because I really had a lot of respect for my former employer. And just through that process, I kind of essentially worked out and got everything tied up, and then went on to launch Scrappy ABM full time. So like I would be very, very frank in the sense that like I did not have it all figured out. What I did have is, before I went, because that's a very difficult and hard conversation to have with your employer. Because I
Mm-hmm.
essentially put it in their hands of like, I don't think I'm the right fit here. Let's work this out for as long as you want me to. Um, so in that context, I made sure that we had enough to cover like our living expenses, and that was where it was. So I'll be honest of like the really September, October, November, December was getting enough money in the door to have margin. And I'm actually now at
Mm-hmm.
this point hired a coach that is helpful for thinking through long-term vision and operationalizing that vision within an organization. He's previously built and sold agencies. So like I'm now thinking a lot more about future, um, in the sense of like, I generally speaking knew I always wanted to start a business. And I think we even talked about that on the last episode a year ago. But to your point, I actually thought I'd do it much later. I thought I'd do it,
Hmm.
5, 10, 15 years from now, not today. And then when I launched Scrappy ABM kind of as a side hustle, it took off, and I was able to then have the conversation with my employer and move into it full time. But now it's like, honestly, my family is provided for. And I want to be very clear of like, I only pull enough money out of the business to make sure that our expenses are covered. So we're not like building significant wealth. Like I'm building the business at its current stage. And I'm now really thinking through what does Scrappy ABM need to become. So right now,
Hmm.
it's me. People buy me. But as I think through what I want it to be, I want it to be a business that can stand on its own 2 feet, where I don't have to be absolutely essential for everything to function. So it's thinking a lot through, how do I structure and operationalize an organization with clear roles, clear job descriptions, clear processes, clear playbooks, so that I can then bring in the right people to grow it. So as I think through
Mm.
future, that's future, which means right now, even though I'm not necessarily working 80 hours a week, and I try to give myself a really, really clear structure, this is like the just eating a lot of like difficult things. Like a good
Yeah.
quote from Mark Twain: "If you have to eat a frog in the morning, eat it. Or if you have to eat a frog during the day, eat it first thing in the morning. If you have to eat two, eat the bigger one first." I am just eating a
Yeah.
lot of frogs right now because they're the things that have to get done. But as I think about future, my daughter, we talked about her a couple times already. She doesn't remember anything that's really happening right now. So if I have to work late one night, I'd rather do it now than when she is in school, and I don't want to miss anything from a program perspective. I want my daughter to always know that I'm going to be present for her. So it's easier right now when everybody's at home, and like I can work a little bit later at night to make sure that everything's set up so that we can actually achieve the future that we want to head towards.
Mm. Yeah, that's good, man. I love how you're thinking about it. And I also think, I would guess a lot of listeners, especially our peers, they probably don't have their own business right now where they're trying to make it to where it's scalable for the future and everything. I'd love to hear how, and maybe you might say, I don't really know, it just kind of worked out. But I felt like without knowing exactly what it would turn into, you were planning for your future, starting in 2020 and really before, but
Yeah.
like the way that you grinded on LinkedIn, the way that you networked, the way that you started your podcast, the way you did things on the side, you would not have Scrappy ABM if it weren't for that. I know 3 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe you didn't know exactly. So how are you kind of like thinking about your future then? Because I think that might be speaking more towards the season that a lot of the listeners are in.
That's a great call out. So to your example of, I had a podcast that was called The Marketing Ladder, and I just interviewed marketing leaders on how they built their career. Selfishly, I was trying to figure out how to build my own career, and it helped me build great relationships within my industry. So
Yeah.
that was how I used the podcast. There was no money in it. I ended up making money for the agency that I worked for, but that was serendipitous. I wouldn't even say that it was like, that wasn't the goal. The goal was truly learning and building a small, people call it a personal brand, but I love the framing that Dave Gerhardt puts on it of just like, if you hate the idea of personal branding, that's fine, but think about it as industry reputation. So like, who do you
Mm.
want to be known as? And I've had people, there's actually a post made about me yesterday, and they didn't call me out, but they sent it to me, that just said, I talked about somebody that's decently well known on LinkedIn behind their back, and said they deserve the success that they're, and like, it's really just kind stuff. But I would say it's largely because I've done everything in my power over the past 3-4 years to learn in public. So if I'm learning something, I just share whatever I'm learning, to be a connector for people. So again, I think I've helped 50 people at this point land jobs out of the marketing ladder. And I never asked for anything. I just said, hey, you two know each other, or you two should know each other, go work with one another. Um, and then very, very practically, the other thing that I did is, anytime anybody asked me to do anything when it comes to like showing up on a podcast, doing a speaking engagement, anything, I have said yes. And largely, I didn't feel equipped for it. If you go back and listen to the first episode where I was a guest, it was a complete failure. It was the worst podcast episode I've ever listened to. But I needed to get the reps in as
Yeah.
being a podcast guest so that I could end up being a better guest long term. And I think now I've been on like 70 podcasts in just 2 years. So I want to be clear, I'm still growing as being a podcast guest. and I'm still growing as being a speaker. I've done probably 20 speaking engagements, largely virtual. I've done 1 or 2 in-person speaking engagements on marketing, but like doing those 3 things. So 1, like being a connector and trying to just be a helpful person within your industry. 2, learning in public so you can build your own reputation online and build a professional reputation. And then 3, just saying yes whenever opportunities come your way. Those are the 3 things that I did over the past 3 or 4 years that then when it came time to launch a business where I needed to monetize, I haven't asked anybody to come work with me, but I've had 15 people on average on a monthly basis come to me and say, I'd like to explore working with you. And not all of them end up moving forward, but the fact that I've been in operation full time since October, and I've already had well over, actually, let me reframe that. The 15 on average is starting in July. So again, 6 months of doing this, 15 people a month coming my way. I know organizations that would kill for that level of inbound. And I'm just like a guy that posts on LinkedIn and does a podcast. So again, that's how I've put it all together. And Tangent's a great call. I didn't know that Scrappy ABM was going to exist 5 years ago. I didn't know that ABM was a thing. I've just really tried to learn how to do it and then do it in a really specific and nuanced way that seems to resonate with people. And as a result has helped me grow a business.
Yes. I mean, when I got on LinkedIn in 2020, I saw a guy named Mason Cosby, who I knew from high school, but I hadn't seen in 4 years, posting and engaging. And like we talked a little bit through LinkedIn. I asked you about starting a podcast. Like you gave me advice on literally how to do this podcast that has completely changed into something else. But like you were for somebody that had just like graduated college, it's like you kind of figured it out. Obviously you have a lot to figure out, but like this, and you call it personal branding, call it whatever you want, but like that networking, that being a connector, that learning in public, did you just have like this wisdom come upon you where you're like, man, I feel like I need to do this? Or did you have somebody like, when were you like, oh man, I think this LinkedIn thing, I think this podcast, this is definitely the right lane? Like how did you know?
Yeah. So I would say actually in 2021, I worked at an agency as a marketing director, and my boss came to me and said, "Hey Mason, we need to build an ABM program, but we don't have any technology or any budget to do it. So can you just like figure a playbook out?" And what I did is I then just started connecting with my target accounts, like the people that I wanted to work with on LinkedIn. I started creating content, and I just, again, to your point, I don't actually know that much, so I can't draw from like 10 years ago. I can only draw from really what I'm learning right now. And it just seemed to resonate well with a couple of people. So that was it, of just like, this is the box that I have to play in, of I need to generate revenue for the agency that I work for. I need to figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't require a lot of money, and it needs to be account focused of the right kind of people that we want to work with. LinkedIn seemed the best place to do it. And then I ended up just having somebody ask me if they wanted to co-launch a podcast with me, and then they backed out of it. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just stick with it. It's like that. I wish it was more thought out. I wish it was more of like an elegant answer of, oh, I had this wonderful epiphany, and I really didn't. I just figured I have a target account list. I can connect all these people on LinkedIn, and maybe they'll go and like and comment on my stuff, and I'll go like and comment on their stuff. And somebody actually asked me to start a podcast and then backed out. So I just kept running with it. And that was how all this came to be.
Yeah. Man, well, none of that happens if you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone. I feel like from the beginning you've said, "Hey, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. I am learning in public," and I've used that phrase from you several different times. If I had an AI tool to run through the amount of times I've said that, and I feel like I usually say your name with it, I gotta trademark that to you. It's good. I love learning in public, and one of the freeing things I've realized about it is like I heard John Maxwell speak the other day. I think a lot of times people are afraid of like what will people think of me? And he said, look, get over yourself, because everybody else already has. Nobody's like laying in bed at night going, Mason Cosby learning in public. What in the world is he talking about? Like, you're doing your thing and you're humble, and it's paid off. And I think a lot of people are afraid to kind of start getting out of their comfort zone and getting off the ground, maybe because they're worried about what other people might think.
I think I'm fortunate in the sense that I know, I don't know how to say it, but I know I'm relatively inexperienced, and I know that I am relatively I'm an idiot. Like, in all honesty, of like, I don't know so much. And I also know that there's a lot of people that are similar to me in that sense of like, they just don't know a lot because they haven't existed long enough to know that much. So
Mhm.
if I just share what I know and what I'm learning, and I don't frame it up as like, this is the authority. And I did get into a stint on LinkedIn where I was like, this is the thing. And like, I've stopped doing that as much. I just say like, this is what I think. This is what I'm doing. It's my opinion. It seems to be working for me. It might work for you. And it's not like this
Yeah.
is the way. And then honestly, to your point around kind of they get over it. I'll be really honest on that front. I have actually had people from college and they'll get engaged and they'll get married and then a bunch of their groomsmen will get together. And I've had friends tell me, yeah, I went to this wedding, I was a groomsman. And somebody brought up, like, have you guys seen Basin being like some kind of a linked influencer? And they'll all actually laugh about it and kind of make fun of me. And that's honestly fine. I don't talk to those people anymore. So I would actually say
Yeah.
I wouldn't know about it unless a friend was like, hey, I just want to like make you aware this happened. I'm like, cool, that's fine. I'm not doing it for them. I can guarantee my friends that are in ministry and in accounting don't care about account-based marketing.
Yeah.
It's not for them, and that's okay. What I'm doing this for
Yeah.
is to help provide for my family, to do something that I really enjoy, and I make a good living off of it, which then equips me to give more to missions and to give to the church. And
Yeah.
that's my goal and my framework. If people don't want to appreciate that, that's completely fine. It doesn't bother me, it doesn't keep me up at night.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I mean, I'm with you. I've had like some experiences like that when it comes to LinkedIn. And I think the lie is like, oh, if there's that one comment, then it's like, oh, these people are thinking about me all the time. But like, I know that you're humble enough and it's not gonna eat you up at night. But also, it's like maybe when they're all together at a wedding, maybe it comes up, but they're not like sitting at their desk at work like, Mason, what is he doing? It's just like
Yeah.
nobody's. I think it's what is it? Who's the prime minister from England? Winston Churchill. He said in your 20s, you're so worried about what other people think of you. In your 40s, you stop worrying what others think of you. And then in your 60s, you realize nobody was thinking about you in the first place. And I feel like that's like a principle that I've like been thinking about a lot. But as we're wrapping up here, I know you talked a little bit about family when it comes to like being a dad. We've talked about your faith a little bit. You've mentioned a few things you're doing from like a dating standpoint with your wife. You've got a lot going on. Like when you have a kid, I think it's easy to focus like so much on that kid. And then when you're starting a business, it's probably easy to do that too. Anything else you're doing to make sure that you're like a present and intentional husband as well?
I'm doing my best on communication.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you a prime example. I told my wife, hey, I'm going to be done around 5:15 today. Like, I have a couple emails wrap up and then I'll be good. I got a response on email that said, hey, I think we're good to move forward. Can you send over the contract?
Oh
That's like,
gosh.
so I said, I'm so sorry. I need 20 more minutes to put this contract together because I'll be honest, it's a $60,000 contract. That's
Yeah.
like this takes our quarterly recurring revenue from 65,000 to 80,000 on a quarterly basis. That is, I like, and he said he could sign tonight. Like, I got to get this
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
So I'm not perfect at it because there's things, especially when you're starting a business, that are just kind of unexpected. So I try to do a lot around structuring my calendar, and I try to do a lot around communication, just saying like, hey, Mary Aaron, I've got a super stacked day of meetings starting at like 8:30 all the way till 5. And I'm probably going to need an hour at the end of the day to like wrap up emails and send some stuff off. I'm probably going to work until 6 tonight. And she's like, hey, thanks for letting me know. As long as we have dinner at 6. I'm like, that's great. There are other days where I'm like, um, everything wraps up around 3. So I'm probably going to
Yeah.
work on a couple other things. I'll probably be done around 4:30, and like just that communication piece. And then the thing that I'm really working on doing, I'm never perfect at it, but I feel like I've gotten a lot better, is I try to leave my laptop in my office and I close the door. And from whenever I walk out of this office to whenever my daughter goes to bed, my daughter goes to bed around 8:30 or 8:45. I try to hold her, I try to entertain my daughter, and then give my wife a little bit of a break. And then on weekends, I'm probably doing a little bit on Saturday in the morning, but I always try to schedule it during a nap time for my daughter. And I handle everything whenever she's awake. other than obviously feeding. And I try to give my wife that break during that time. And then the other beauty is, again, our daughter goes to bed at 8. She is 5 months old and she's already sleeping through the night. So from 8 until about
Nice.
10, I've got, or really 8:30 to about 10, I've got some time that's just one-on-one time with my wife. So again, trying to
Yeah.
protect those times as best we can. It's not perfect. I have friends that call and catch up, and I need that time. And my wife also recognizes that, to just have friends that are outside of business and our marriage. But just the communication piece to the best of our ability. And I want to be very clear that my wife is very gracious with me, because she also, for lack of a word, is appreciative of what I'm trying to do for our family. She knows that this
Hmm.
is stressful. She knows that this is a lot, but she's been very gracious with me. So I, as a dad, I'm more focused on how I take care of my wife, and my wife is more focused on how she can take care of our daughter in that kind of hierarchy. So again, I think if I
Yeah.
take care of her, my daughter will be taken care of. And one of the best ways I can take care of my wife is whenever I'm free, I'm taking care of our daughter. So that's kind of how I think through it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great way to think about it, man. Well, a lot of what I've been saying lately here is that I think a lot of us are just asleep at the wheel of our own life, and we think that we'll just kind of make things happen and drift to our goals, and we're not going to drift to our desired destination. So that's why I want people to wake up and really lead themselves. So I didn't do this in the last podcast, but I do it now. I need you to tell everybody to wake up and lead. So I'm going to say it's time for you and me, and you say to wake up and lead. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, it's time for you and me.
To wake up and lead.
Let's go.